I'm sorry, what was the topic again about this? Is this the D&D
Oh,
for Dummies one?
world building.
Okay.
Let's see,
World
come on
building for
down.
dummies. Yeah.
Let's see. We have a bit of stuff that I'm going to be working with, so I'm going to hide this for now while I kind of go through this. Maybe set this to the main page. D&D Beyond sources.
Backstory.
Back streets back, all right.
Oh. Yeah, I was thinking since it's an alternate world, I was thinking. Is that shot?
Oh, there we go. Okay, I accidentally disconnected for a bit.
Uh-oh.
Something weird happened because I did too.
Yeah.
Oh, what? Skittles.
Let's see.
I
Feeling alright?
No, allergy season sucks.
Oh, no. I wish they would go away and leave my friend alone. Oh, excuse me.
Let's see. All right. A lot of good stuff to talk about today. Blend to light design, amazing mashup of 3 is 1. All right.
What? Got my water, got my chips.
Let's see.
Go.
Yes. We got water. Water. No,
Oh.
also consider this one today.
Oh. Let's hope this world also doesn't get a giant hole in the center of it.
There's definitely gonna be a bit that's added to this that isn't as chaotic as previously, but it's still gonna be very fun. Maybe
Yeah.
still as chaotic as previous, but who knows?
Gotcha. I'm at this point. I'm just again. You're close friends. There's a group. At this point, I wouldn't be surprised if they somehow pulled or somehow was able to unlock 10th level magic.
Right. We'll see.
Just like the bard rolled the nat 20 along with everyone else boosting him, and it's just like congratulations, you've now convinced the whatever goddess controls that to give you the ability to cast a 10th level spell. I'd be like, oh no. I'm interested one of these days before I ever move, go to my local Barnes and Nobles. I'll probably get one of the Pathfinder things. But it does look interesting to me. I would like to learn the difference between how Pathfinder looks from 5e.
I'm trying to think what else.
hate back bumps. Okay. Okay.
Let's get it up. Beep, bop, bop, ba, da, bop.
Oh fuck. I'm surprised no one's done that in Friday night fucking scat night.
Right.
Yeah, that'd be a good mod. Oh. Excuse me.
Hold on. Oh, here we go. Hello, hello.
Hey Zeno, hey Skittles, hey Rika.
Hello, how you
Hello,
doing?
hello.
Uh, I just played the scariest game of Dead by Daylight in my life.
Oh yeah? Why is that?
I almost died.
Ooh.
So hear me out, right? Me, Vaughn, Zinni, and Eli were playing because, Amy was done, so she wanted to, take a break. And Vaughn and I wanted to keep playing, Zinni wanted to keep playing, and Eli finally decided to get on. So we're going against the Oni this time.
Okay.
Vaughn dies. No, it wasn't her. Eli died first, pretty early in the game. Then Vaughn died. I found the hatch, but that wasn't really much of use. Because as soon as he hooked Zinni, he realized where the hatch was and was camping the hatch. So I decided to finish up the last generator, rush towards the exit, and while I'm opening the exit, I can see him stomping towards me.
Oh
So
no.
by this time, my heart is racing, and I'm praying that he doesn't have no one escapes death. I opened the door, he didn't have it, and I just took off outside the door. I was gone.
Nice.
I cannot tell you how fast my heart was racing.
Oh no, yeah, I can imagine. I mean, you've already seen my reaction by playing this game just a few rounds through. Like I can only imagine being in that situation. I somehow always find a way to get the killer to me and away from everyone else, which I feel like is the most Dwight thing I can do.
Yeah, I mean that seems about right.
Yeah, but I don't mind. Like the one game we were in the like saloon area, and then a pyramid head literally like was right next to me. I'm like.
Oh yeah, that's also another story I want to say. We also ran into a pyramid head twice, the same pyramid head twice. That's pretty
Oh,
fun.
fuck.
He kept going for Zinni too.
Hmm.
I'm trying to see. Form their own.
Okay.
But that's enough about what I did. How are y'all doing today?
Doing okay. Right now, I'm writing up a few things before I'm trying to do like last minute write ups because all today during work, I kept thinking about the Pantheon for the New World, and I was like, Skittles heard me like rambling for a long time, like how the story of the universe was created for the homebrew world, and so it's officially like I have it in my head. I'm just like trying to put it down somewhere, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. So hold on. Decades are obviously for tens of years, and millennias are for hundreds or thousands of years.
Fuck.
Wait a minute.
Can you
Century.
yeah, can you?
Oh no, I'll look it up. I'm looking it up now. Give me a second.
Thousands.
Hi, what was
I'm
that, my
sorry.
love?
Century is 100, I think. Millennia is thousands.
Thank you.
Okay.
That's what I was trying to make sure. Let's see.
Thank you, Skill.
Yeah, that's a period of 10. Hold on a minute.
All right. Trying to see. I think we're pretty much just ready to go. Just wait. When GTR gets back, I'll go ahead and start us off and explain what we're doing today.
Gotcha.
Let's see. Let me put out the light.
Okay, I'm good.
There we go. Okay. So, without further ado, let's get started. Welcome, everyone, to the Nerdy Talk with XenoLich, where this last time we talked a little bit about how it is to, with the new Unearthed Arcana content, player creation, and just overall like homebrew stuff. We really had talked about a lot, but we wouldn't have. I think the biggest part about homebrew is, you can always add your own little flares and things, but the big step that everyone wants to do is creating their own campaigns as well as their own lands and worlds. So that's what today's all about. Today is all about world building 101. And joining me today are a few people. You'll see people as well come and go throughout the stream, but at least starting today, we have Rico, who you will all recall from our Tuesday sessions, and moving forward will be in our next Tuesday we'll finally be joining the Icewind Dale campaign again. All right, he's muted. I'm gonna go ahead and we also have JTR, who you all would recognize.
Hello.
There we go.
Oh wait.
And we also have JTR, who you would all recognize as Heckle from our Tuesday campaign.
Hello, everyone.
And last but certainly not least, Skittles, who you'd all recognize from my Saturday campaign and my lover.
Oh my goodness.
Yes,
Hello.
yes, she's amazing. So, and with that, and as well, the hosts. I am your XenoLich, and let's talk about world building. World building is kind of a big it's a big thing, but it's certainly not impossible. I think a lot of people when they get into world building, it can be really easy to start thinking big plans and then realizing that you are without without a directive and without a path, and will get lost. And then as you keep coming up with these concepts, you'll realize that you either overwhelm yourself and lose interest, or you'll find yourself too you'll find yourself too underwhelmed. Maybe you feel like it's not enough, and so you move on to other areas. Well, without further ado, let's just explain. There's a lot of different ways you can go about with world building, and certainly one of the best ways is by starting off with the beginning. I am someone who likes to create my land first. There's a few different tools in which you can utilize for this. A lot of different world generators are really nice for offering this type of subject. However, though, when in doubt, I think world... Here we go. I usually like to do the Donjon Fractal World Generator. It's a very nice way to kind of just randomize, create your own homebrew worlds, or just randomly input numbers and see what happens. You can fine-tune what you're looking for, and with the fine-tuning, you can really adjust it. So, for example, this one is 96% water, 34% ice. So if I click create, pretty interesting land. There's a lot of ice. I'm not really a fan of the ice too much, so let's go ahead and see about bringing that ice down to, like, let's say a 10%. There we go. Looking a little bit nicer for what I'd actually want. And this would be an example of just a world you can create. But you can always... One thing I always recommend is once you have a world created, open that image in a new tab and create more. You want to keep creating worlds until you feel like you have something that's really something you like. I like this one a little bit more. It's actually centered properly on this rather than this one, which is split in half. And you kind of just keep going. Once you get a good amount, you can from there filter it down to the ones you like, and you could stick with that. I go a little bit of an extra step further, and on top of using the Donjon Fractal World Generator, I also use an application known as WonderDraft. WonderDraft is a great product that allows for some really intricate map making. And while I'm not going to be able to open up WonderDraft because it does take a little bit to open up, I am going to showcase Clip Studio, which is where I have which is showing how I took one of the Fractal World Generators and used WonderDraft to start actually making a map with it. And thus, here is the sneak peek for everyone for the Homebrew world. Here, you guys can see that the lands have been formed. I was able to redefine the lakes, create rivers that connect those lakes, and using WonderDrafts and its icons, I was able to paint the land as well as add general terrain structures such as mountains, forests, deserts, and by painting the land white, I was able to differentiate where the snow is even. I think those are the four most basic things you can really do to a place without adding like cities and stuff. And your world is created. Where do you want to go from here? Let's see. I think it really just matters more along the lines of what it is you look more forward to as a creator. A lot of people really like to do the gods. They like to jump into the different intricacies of the world. What are some special places? For me, at least when it came to creating this world, I thought something very simple. I needed to create a world that felt alive and had different forms of government controlling at a time. I'm very much a fan of having these borders that define continents and countries. And so I took a look at this, and with help from Skittles, I was able to understand how territories are usually formed based off of natural barriers. So by cutting it through here, I believe it was here, I'm able to more and more define an actual continent. After going through and realizing where everything needed to be divvied up, from there, I just kind of more redefined the lines. After going through them all, create what actually feels like a border edge, drawing a little bit more of a crag through it, and making sure to not go over into the water. And voila. Crags were formed that actually provided proper boundaries within the different lands. And once I created those different countries, I then decided, how did I want this world to be? How did I want the makeup of the world as far as the races go? Because when people are making their characters, people are judged more based off of look from afar than what their class does. So it's why when people see tieflings, they immediately think rogue. When they see humans, usually fighter comes to mind, and when they see Goliaths, barbarian comes to mind. Your characters are usually, as far as roleplay wise, when someone sees another, you build up stereotypes based off of what they look like. So I thought of how did I want to divide up the races. I realized I needed to create something in which all of the races could coexist while still making this kind of a fantasy. My big issue that I ran into creating this was how did I want to go about with technology? Because previously technology was something that was so commonplace, it was utilized for a lot of different stuff, and I feel like in some instances you get something that is good, but I think technology creates a lot more creates more problems than it actually solves. And so I wanted to make it where, well, how do I make a technologically advanced empire? What races occupy that? And it kind of just dawned on me that most of the Magic the Gathering stuff is usually what deals with technology. So let's find a way to differentiate the Magic the Gathering content. Pick. From there, I have separated those. What remains? Humanoid and monstrous races. Or another way is more commonly good races and more commonly evil races. And going through all the different races, I realized I needed to kind of start putting down the list. And so eventually my list came down to this. My notes for the Homebrew world. Races divided amongst the regions. I put these in 6 categories as good races that would be grouped together, good races that are more unique and typically build their own societies, maybe just like they're not big enough to build their own societies, and thus they'll be sprinkled through. Grouped evil races, unique evil races. These are races that while they can form their own societies, they're not quite as like commonplace as the goblinoids or orcs from the grouped evil races, and even ogres. And the last 2 categories are grouped neutral races and and unique neutral races. This is where I really decided what it was going to be. And so with that, I went to seeing that there was good, evil, and neutral. So let's take the commonly good races. Once again, I'm only using what's more stereotypically there, and you'll see we're going to run with this. And I decided that most of the commonly good races are physically weaker than your commonly evil races. And so I wanted to give them the most territory. Looking at the way I divided the land, it was divided into 12 different chunks. And so I decided, let's give 5 of those chunks to the commonly good races. And so, you'll see here, it was such as 1, 2, 3, 4. Technically, this is part of the one over here. And 5. So, these 5 are in here. I made one continent which was clearly their kind of homeland, and another bit of them which is showing that they have invaded another land, indicating that there's conflict between 2 of them. And so, it was pretty obvious that I needed to make this area following up 1, 2, 3 of the commonly evil races, and to show that they still have a good foothold, 4. So 5, 4. Now we have the commonly evil races also doing what the good races are doing, and taking over territories and expanding on their stuff. But that leaves us with 3 lands. Here, and this one's a part of the one over on the far most left. And so I needed to think to myself, it's kind of strange. Why is it that one of the most technologically advanced races has the smallest territory? Going through, and I kind of just thought to myself, maybe they don't want to expand. They are content with where they are, or maybe there's a reason why they can't expand. Secrets for later. And so I decided that instead of expanding outward, they expanded upward and downward. And so this explains how on top of the MTG Magic the Gathering races, I have grouped the avian and aquatic races with the green lands. And so that's how your Aarakocra and your Kenku are over here, as well as, let me go ahead and see this, as well as also throw in your more aquatic races and even more Fey folk and stuff. Like, we're not talking elf Fey folk, we're talking like owl folk, the rabbit folk, and even maybe hags. That's something more different than it, because they're typically also on the evil side. More thought for later. But the world has now been made. Races are inhabiting the world. And while I was going in the process of trying to label the stuff, I thought, you know what? Labels can come later. Let's just do something else. What else can you do besides just creating land? Well, let's start with the gods. Gods and the pantheon is huge for when you're creating a homebrew area. And so this I struggled with for a bit. I knew that the best way to go about the gods was just basically taking a look at the cleric class and taking a look at all its subclasses. From there, I divvied up all its subclasses and started realizing that I needed to do something about this. I needed to delve further into divine versus arcane magic and which ones are the rulers and which ones came first, and eventually it just led to me kind of just thinking to myself, how did this all get created? Right? There's in mythology, what the first thing that always happens is the universe is created, and of that universe your planet is made. And so I wanted to take a little bit of a listen from you guys to see what are some of the more common things you guys hear when you think the universe is being created. And once again, religion, mythology, scientific reasons, they're all eligible. They're all, legitimate here when it comes to us creating our own world, because technically, it's your world. So how would you guys envision the creation of the universe?
I'd say more of a religious format, like some sort of god made it.
All right. And so your creation of the universe begins with there was always an entity, and this entity created further things. Okay. What about you, Rico?
Well, for me, I feel like, again, for me, most of the world, I think it would be similar to, of course, the gods are there, but I feel like it's more like, how do I say, the gods are a byproduct of people's beliefs. Like before, like, it's like what most people might think, there is no God, but with enough concentrated belief, and with, in this case, magic is in most cases, is the life force of anything. Imagine a world that's so entrenched with magic and has no gods, that because the people want to believe in a god, the magic feels that and is like, okay, well, you have a god, and then there's a god based on, whatever the people need. If they need hope, there's a god of hope. If there's famine, there's a god of like the harvest and all those different type of things.
I like that. I really like that a lot, because that is definitely what it's just looking at one of my favorite game series, Dark Souls. It's pointed out that the gods grow weaker because there's less humanoids that have faith in them. And so it's pointed out that the more faith you have, the stronger of power you have, because you're giving more faith to a god, and so you have more access to divine magic.
I returned.
Welcome back.
And
oh, sorry, what was that, GTR?
what did I miss?
No, just Rico explaining that, like, for him, it's kind of the humanoids were here, and it's their belief combined with the magic of the world that creates the gods. So here's another interesting thing that's always once again, you're gonna hear a lot of credit to Skittles, because she's almost always here when I'm rambling and stuff and kind of coming up with things. But she showed me a video that explains how different cultures and religions and mythologies have their own creations of the world. One of the most common things is the universe came from nothing, and a lot of that nothing is either purely nothing, or the universe had like this kind of like primordial water that existed in it. I really like that, and so I thought to myself, water seems like a kind of weird thing to work with, but when you use the word primordial water, it makes a little bit more sense. But then it dawned on me, we're in D&D. One of the biggest things that always exists in D&D and we pull from is called the weave. The weave is what we alter and change and use to cast spells and utilize magic. And so then I thought to myself, some of the biggest examples of the weave being put into the highest and lowest points is anti-magic and wild magic. As you guys already are aware, wild magic can be very crazy. Just taking a look at the Sorcerer's Wild Magic Surge table, you can see that Wild magic can make you go from one spell, like, oh, I'm going to cast Cure Wounds, to, oh no, I cast Fireball instead on myself. Or I've turned into a potted plant. Wild magic is really crazy, and it has so many different effects that it can do.
Mm-hmm.
But in the complete polar opposite, oh man, if there's any group that knows about fighting anti-magic, it's probably you guys.
Oh yes, most
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
And so anti-magic is the lack of magic. The weave has a hole created, and that hole means that there's no magic that can exist there. There are ways to kind of go around this, but nonetheless, I thought, let's take the god of magic, because you can always have multiple gods representing a single domain. And in the first cleric domain in what's number 4? The first cleric domain stated in alphabetical order is the Arcana domain, aka a cleric that devotes their time to the god of magic. So, what does that mean? I created 2 gods of magic, 2 complete polar entities. The first is the god of wild magic and the god of anti-magic. How did these 2 come into being? Well, the weave has always existed. In my homebrew world, my idea is that in the beginning there was nothing but the weave. The weave is this thing that constantly exists. And so eventually over millennia, over even thousands of millennias, the weave formed 2 creatures where the weave got extremely tangled up and combined to create some of the biggest surges of energy. Came one of the 2 gods, the goddess of wild magic, or the god of wild magic. You know, who knows? Gods don't really have genders. They don't have to have sex. Their offspring is weird.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, this was the god of wild magic. This god was eccentric, creative, extremely over the top, and loved to create. And whereas the weave was tangled up and created the god of wild magic, somewhere else, the weave had been pulled apart to the point where there was absolute nothing. And in the lack of magic came forth an entity that was the god of anti-magic. These 2 were complete polar opposites. Anti-magic, compared to wild magic, was very introverted, quiet, and more than anything, they found that their lack of magic would disrupt the weave and destroy it in a lot of cases. These 2 were entities that could perceive the weave and just do all types of things with it. They came across each other, and their magic when the 2 of them touch, the weave is in a balance, because wild magic and anti-magic just cancel each other out.
Right.
And in the beginning of their life, when they were beginning to test out, they were messing with the weave, using this kind of strange conversation and togetherness. And let me go ahead and pull up what I had here. Here we go. In the beginning, there was and when they were still learning how to exist and what their limits are, they created the elements and the elemental planes. So, this is pretty obvious: fire, water, earth, and air. These elements were created, and it was just now all of a sudden, now it's not just the weave. Now there's elements in the weave, and the weave combining with these elements can do all types of crazy things.
Mm-hmm.
On top of this, taking it into effect that these 2 are not perfect, they also can argue and make peace with one another. Whenever the 2 fight, their tears create distortions in the weave. Wild magic tears are pretty obvious. It creates zones of wild magic where, like, no matter what, this area is always a wild magic zone. So spellcasters have a harder time controlling their spells here. And
Right.
when anti-magic cries and their tears hit areas, their tears form holes in the weave that form anti-magic zones. These are areas that no matter what a spellcaster may try, they can never get a spell casted here. So it kind of creates, like, imagine trying to invade a city as a group of spellcasters, and you realize, oh, there's a reason why this city's so hard to overtake. It's surrounded in anti-magic, and and like this city built of warriors loves that so much. So they like, come on, come to us. We have huge ballistas that are ready to take you on. And that was kind of really, like, I really like this whole idea. But eventually, years pass. The two gods mature and begin to learn to love. Their love and lust created the first gods of the universe. The first, these two are deities. I want to point this out. I like that in Greek mythology there's titans and gods. So in this one, not necessarily titans and gods, but I want to label these two as the first deities, and their offspring as the first gods.
Right.
And so, taking a look at the different cleric domains, you have to. I kind of had to think, what are the absolute necessities of domains? Let's taking a look at it. Forge domain. I didn't really think that a forge god was needed quite yet, or at least was one of the absolutes.
That's understandable.
And neither was knowledge, peace, war, or even order. Right? This is still beginning. There's no humans that exist yet. There's no humanoids that exist yet to cause any of these things. But what I definitely knew I needed was death, grave, life, light, and nature. So, let's start with the two obvious ones, death and life. Death and life are polar opposites as well. They argue and bicker a lot. And
of course.
Life like their parent before, loved to create, and death like their parent before, loved to end things. Their forces became, think of it like their conflict was so powerful and so emotional, it actually caused the weave to form two whole planes of existence called the positive plane and the negative plane.
That would make sense.
Exactly. And so, in the player's handbook, I'm going to post this in the stream VC right here. In the player's handbook, there's something that is a good thing to always look at, and especially when it comes to creating a homebrew world, called the cosmology wheel. This is the wheel that determines what... it's going right here in stream VC text.
Okay.
This wheel... Oh, and I almost forgot. Let me actually fucking... I realized I wasn't even, like... streaming.
Yeah, I was gonna like DM you and say, were you gonna stream this?
Yes. Okay, hold on. Let me let me move that quickly so you guys can see the stream and you guys can see what's been going on here. Here. You guys can see the map, right? And now this is the homebrew world. And these are the different divisions. Yes. Yeah. So,
I've been watching through your Twitch stream.
Okay, yeah.
So I pretty much just saw everything.
Perfect. Okay. So yes. Taking a look back at this. So this is the cosmology wheel. So, taking a look, we have to kind of use the gods to explain how the cosmology is brought about, and so pretty obvious. You guys can see the elemental chaos and the four elements, right? So,
right.
Yeah, air, water, fire, and earth. From here, then we take a look at these two lines are the positive and negative planes that surround the cosmology wheel.
Okay.
And from there, I'm like, okay. When anti-magic and wild magic realized that the chaotic element, that the elemental chaos was a bit too much for their children to be around, they decided to do something about that. And so, using their powers, they formed the ethereal plane to not only help separate the different elemental planes, but to also create a space in which their children could mold and do things of their own accord, being safe from the elemental chaos.
Okay, interesting.
And so what was left in here was just a big jumble of air, water, fire, and earth. It's like giving a kid a bit of Play-Doh and saying have fun with it.
Right.
The elements still having chaos. What was left of the elemental chaos was expelled outward and formed an entire thing that surrounded all of this, known as I've stated, the elemental chaos. It's a place that no creature willingly goes into to live in, because it's just too destructive in there. Even the gods avoid it.
Oh,
right.
wow.
Let me pull this up. Okay, so with this, I was then thinking, okay, so life and death are arguing with each other, creating the positive and negative planes. What about light, nature, and grave? Oh, for those wondering as well, the difference between grave and death. Death is what you'd imagine. It is the embodiment of murder, kill, most things negative, and life is the embodiment of creating life and most things positive. Grave is the understanding of the absolute. There absolutely must be life, and there absolutely must be death. If life is the positive plane and death is the negative plane, then grave is the middle of them both. They are neither positive or negative. They are completely content, understanding that you cannot have life without death. The two must exist in a balance.
I'm assuming. I'm assuming that this god likes to relax in the material plane.
Probably. I'll even go into that in a bit too as well. So, nature is pretty obvious. So here's an interesting thing. Notice how the elements exist without the nature god.
Right.
I described it as this. The elements have always been a thing before nature was born. But what nature did is that nature, life, and grave took the massive bin of Play-Doh and created things with it. Nature, nature went upward with their material, and created a whole beautiful world. And because it was influenced by the positive plane, it shifted and became something mystical and beautiful, and became the and by being influenced by the positive plane, became the Feywild. So this is what nature created, whereas grave, on the other hand, went further down, and being influenced by the negative plane, created the Shadowfell, a horrific place, yet though serenely beautiful in a lot of cases. It's weird how even in death, things can still be melancholic or beautiful.
Right.
And lastly, that left light to use their own material to create the material plane. And so
basically the space in between.
Exactly. A space neither affected by positive or negative. Light was very much not one to take sides. And so being inspired by what their own planes had caused, life and death were distracted from their conflict and actually went to go and help create new things. And so life went to the Feywild and created Fey creatures. We're talking Eldari elves. We're talking hags. We're talking fairy sprites. All types of Fey creatures that existed here. Owl folk and raven and rabbit folk are brought into life here. Death went to Grave's domain and created things that were to be against life. Here, the undead were made. We're talking vampires. We're talking ghouls, zombies. Everything that typically goes bump in the night comes from the Shadowfell. And that left Light to, without help from their siblings, Light went off to create monsters, beasts, dragons, and giants. I think there's some sort of reptilians also in there, but we'll get to that. And so Light created these creatures, but there was something that went wrong. Light felt like no matter what they did, it would never be as beautiful or as creative as what their siblings came up with, despite making literal dragons. And Light fell into a depressive state. Without Light supervising the material plane, the creatures that Light created were able to run amok and created their own hierarchy amongst themselves. With centuries passing, it turned out to be that the dragons and giants would be the two most dominant ones, and they'd be the ones who were constantly like against each other. Oh, almost forgot. There's one other thing. There's one other thing that's very important. In the process of light, nature, and grave molding these materials, two new gods were born. The actual change that they were causing was affecting the magic around, and the two new gods that were formed were Forge and Chaos. So the Forge domain, and I guess we'll go Chaos. Oh no, sorry, no, Forge and Tempest. That's what it is. So when you take the elements and take them to an extreme, you create storms, grand typhoons, earthquakes, tsunamis, volcanoes, and this is the Tempest domain. But take it the other way around. let's create beautiful masterpieces that are more refined and still. They had they have more of a purpose than just destruction. This is the Forge. And so the Forge and Tempest Domain were pretty present during the material plane, and so they created these lands in which the creatures inhabited. But, like I said, Light fell into a depressive state and just kind of didn't know what to do. And for centuries, these creatures were kind of just left to their own devices. Eventually, the gods saw what had happened to Light, and in an attempt to help Light, for the first time, all of the gods worked together to create something new. This is the first time that the positive plane and the negative plane were still, as life and death helped put aside their differences to help Light. And so, humanoids were born. Humans, orcs, goblins, humans, orcs, goblins, lizard folk, Yanti, all types of humanoids were made in this time. And it was so nuts how this was their grand masterpiece, the humanoids themselves. Light was happy again, and strange enough, when humanoids were made, Light returned to the earth.
I see.
And so a new age came. This was an age where the dragons and giants found that there was something new that was approaching. Something that, while maybe not as powerful as them, came in numbers.
I see.
Yes. Oh, also, it should also be mentioned that the Tempest being this kind of like chaotic energy and the Forge being this more energy put into order created the two other planes, such as the planes of law and the planes of chaos.
Yeah, I was about to ask when we were gonna get to those two.
Yes. Here's an interesting thing as well. So while they were all kind of doing this, something that none of them ever expected, none of the gods ever expected happened because it was a byproduct of it. The planes of law, chaos, the positive plane, and the negative plane all formed one huge bubble known as the astral plane. They created space and time.
Ooh. That's actually. Oh, I never thought of that.
Mm-hmm. Space and time were formed from positive and negative energies combining with order and chaotic energies. And ready for this? Now that there was a bubble that would hold it all together, the elemental chaos that ran amok started to get influenced by these planes and created planes that were on different scales of it. On the most negative part of the plane, they created Hades. On the most lawful side, they created Mechanus. On the most chaotic side, they created Limbo. And on the most positive side, they created Elysium. And as well as all of the planes in between. So, if you're looking for the most for the most negative and the most lawful, that's how the Nine Hells was born. The Nine Hells was born because they are exactly on the epitome of negative and order. They are lawful evil.
Yeah.
Whereas
I can see that.
Whereas the Abyss is formed because it is chaotic evil. It is further on the chaotic scale and further along in the negative scale that it's right in between. Just like Mount Celestia is lawful good and Arborea is chaotic good.
Okay. If I may, as I was wondering, because like, I mean, there are obviously things that are keeping them all together in their own forms, but like, I'd say, for example, I guess as a real world example is let's go with the simplest one, the ethereal plane. What were to happen if someone were to do something similar to like chipping away at the ethereal plane, like how we chip away at the ozone layer? Like what would start to
now let me
happen to the
explain this.
material plane?
Here's one of the biggest things. Now, there's a reason why the easiest way for me to explain it, it's hard to do something stronger than the original two deities created.
Okay.
The original two deities created the ethereal plane to separate from the elemental chaos. And so you would need something as powerful as the two first deities. You would need something more powerful than the two first deities combined to destroy or do something physical to the ethereal plane.
Okay.
Right.
So it's like that's nearly impossible because they were both just born from the universe itself.
Yeah, I see.
And so it's like, okay, and the astral plane is kind of like, as much as it's contained, quote unquote, in a bubble, the astral plane really has no limits, you know? Technically, the astral plane goes out as far as the eye can see and then some for even the gods, and it just keeps going and going and going in an endless loop. And it's inside of the astral plane that these other locations exist. This is also, as a side note, this just dawned. So, by the way, whenever I say, like, right now, you guys are catching me in a creative funk where so not a funk, but in a creative mood where as soon as something pops into my head, it's interesting. So, now I'm on the fence of doing this. What if, instead of on different quote-unquote planes, astral planar travel was more of planeteer travel? So what if the Nine Hells was actually a planet that was the Nine Hells, but instead of actually like a spherical planet, it was like an actual stacked planet, and it was, once again, it was just surrounded by the astral plane, because that's how this all works. And on top of this, one other thing as well, to tie all of these together, one other thing was formed as a byproduct now. Ready for this? The river Styx. A line that can connect all of the planes together that is nigh impossible to find because it is ever changing and ever shifting. And so the cosmology wheel was born. And with humanoids onto the earth, the gods looked to themselves and thought, these are some of the most beautiful things we have ever created. We need something to help guide them, to teach them, to make them their own. Let's, like our parents before us, let's give them the tools to make new things outside of this. And so Light came up with a brilliant idea. They will shine a light upon the emotions of all the gods and turn that, and using the power of the weave, turn that into physical entities that would be the final gods, the final greater gods. And so we then get, hold on, let's see. Oh, there we go. Welcome back. Rico, you there? There we go. Okay, and so shining a light onto the greater gods and creating the final set of greater gods. Now, here's where the last of the pantheon is. Ready for this? So, shining the light onto the gods, they created knowledge, order, peace, twilight, and war. Oh, sorry, not order. Hold on. Yes. Knowledge, order, peace, twilight, and war domains. These 5 would dictate the different ways people will go about. Now, allow me to explain. Pretty obvious. Knowledge is pretty obvious where it is, but allow me to do it in this order. Order is the ability to create law, to create societies and communities. Let us allow these people to build upon themselves and form groups that allow them to do so. Peace said, then allow me to give them the love to look at one another and create more of themselves. Twilight said, with that love should also come a need to protect. Twilight said, with that love should come the need to protect them from the forces that might go against them in the natural world. Twilight represents your protective, your need to be protecting of others. War said, or they fight each other. Look at this. You're forming communities. Communities create conflict. And so with conflict, there's only one way to settle that. And lastly, with knowledge stating, not all things must be settled with knowledge. Not all things must be settled with violence. Sometimes it's a matter of a compromise and a trade. And so these 5 things, knowledge, war, twilight, peace, and order, became the last 5 greater deities that would be more direct with the humanoids than any of the other gods, because they're greatly influencing them. And while the humanoids may have more interactivity from these 5, it doesn't mean that they don't believe in the others. Light is always ever present, nature's always ever present, life, death, grave, and of course arcana are always present, along with the order that is from the Forge and the tempest that is the chaos that is from the tempest. This is our domain of pantheons that will always be present and ever so. And from here, this is, like I said, these are the greater gods. Any other smaller gods can always be added in. So, for example, the when the elements shift and snow gets created, the humans' belief of the different systems creates the seasons, and with the seasons comes the lesser gods of each season. So there'd be a god of winter, autumn, spring, and summer. But those would never be as powerful as the greater gods, and so that's why the lesser deities get formed. Smaller things obviously get formed more and more too, but it's to kind of understand that the best way to go about with the pantheon is kind of create a story with the domains presented, and see what you can run with that. What do you guys think of what we have so far? Because by the way, everything I'm saying is going to be like, this is all for the homebrew world.
Yeah, I like the concept of it. I like the fact that, you know, there, like, for every like deity, there were more deities that they had to create, you know, to greater influence the humans. And like, when the final set was made, those are gonna be, you know, the ones that like heavily impacted how the humans behave. Well, no, I don't mean I mean like humanoids, you know, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I also like how there's a story behind how all of this stuff was created.
Yes.
I like that. I like that a lot as well.
Mm-hmm.
I especially like how, you know, if unchecked, like if stuff goes unchecked, it can greatly impact the world. Like how, like, you know, unchecked certain things like the giants and the dragons.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
They basically created a dictatorship for themselves and basically went to war between each other, and I like that a lot. I really like that.
Yes. What about you, Rico? What are your thoughts on what's been created so far?
So far, me personally, again, I do like it a lot. I do like how, like, again, each of the individual gods kind of like over time. It's not like one things happen all at once. Like, again, like an overtime thing where this happened and this happened and this happened, and everyone just has kind of like their own way. Everyone kind of, without realizing it, even though some forces would like to have conflict, indirect, and some would like to have peace indirectly by all of them, I guess, kind of clashing, and by working together make the very things that they want, which is life and death and conflict and war, and just overall the counterbalance of everything that I guess everyone wants.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
It's
that's how I see it.
it definitely was like, as soon as like I was earlier today, I was like, man, how am I gonna go about this? And then it like clicked on me, and as soon as I was like, okay, let me like create the weave, let me do this, and then like as I kind of created anti-magic and wild magic, then it's like, okay, what do I want to do from here? And then like the gears in my head were just turning bit by bit, and eventually just the pantheon was formed. The greater pantheon was formed. This also is implied that, remember this, lesser deities can still be worshipped, just like the greater deities. On top of this, just because your domain is the life domain doesn't mean you have to pray to the life god. Other gods can also represent that domain and can still give the same benefits as any other god, but it's just that what the actual gods do is different than what they provide. Hence why, like, even if you are a life cleric, it doesn't mean you have to go to the life god. You can go to a god that is like of technically the god of peace brings about families because of love, and you create communities that way, and you create, you know, creatures, and with love comes life, and so even the god of peace could also be your life domain if you really want to talk it that way. But looking at the kind of cleric stuff, when you look at the cleric domains, it gives you an idea of, like, I guess a guideline of how to kind of go about it, because multiple gods can each god can represent multiple domains. They're not strictly stuck to one. If you haven't noticed,
Right.
wild magic creates a lot of things, and so technically you can argue that the wild magic god, on top of being magic itself, also represents life.
Do you think having a pantheon is absolutely necessary
No, not exactly.
for world building stuff?
No. A pantheon is so if a lot of times most people who create worlds usually go off of like a formula, and most formulas state that pantheons are a thing because religion and mythology has always been a fascinating thing to talk about, and it's kind of how do I put this? Humans created myths and religions to explain things that they could not conceive or put into concept, right? We
Right.
we don't know that the sun revolves around the earth. We explain that the sun comes around the earth because that's the sun god gracing us with our presence. Just like we believe until gravity was like a thing that was like more theorized and put into thought. Oh, we're bound to the earth by the gods ruling, and that's why we every time we jump we always come back down, and no matter how high you come, you will always come crash back down. Mythology and religion is created for that thing, but it's entirely on the person to create a world that if they really want, they don't have to have gods. In fact, they don't even have to have multiple gods. They can either have 0, 1 god, 2 gods, 10, 100, doesn't matter. And even crazier than that, not necessarily crazier than that, but in another respect, another thing that the Dungeon Master's Guide also points out is instead of gods inhabiting, what about in every bit of the earth there's a spirit that represents. So there's a spirit that represents these set of blades of grass. There's a spirit for this tree. You know, that's more. I think that's more based like Asian mythology and religion, where each like there are spirits that reside in the different things that are of the natural world. And so it's like a world without faith is hard to really put into practice because we don't have a lot of real world references of a world without faith. But faith doesn't necessarily mean you have to have a pantheon. It could mean spirits. People could also not believe in the gods, and maybe if you look at like Dark Souls, for example, Dark Souls, the gods are more mortal because in Dark Souls, the gods, they're powered by the faith that people give them. So if enough people believe you to be a god, you become a god. If no one believes you to be a god, you fade into non-existence or become so weak that you become immortal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways that you can go about like choosing to create a pantheon, yes or no.
Yeah, because I was thinking that skills about because I about hey yeah what you say is true. There isn't a lot of worlds that show that much gods. Because again, kind of going back to what I said with the weave, well you said with the weave and how I kind of brought up to where like magic and people's belief can create a god. I would kind of feel like even the mortal god thing makes sense. Where it's like, oh, maybe if a warrior says if I get a wizard or something, or have the ability to absorb enough magic, then I could theoretically become like again, like you said, a mortal god, or what we would consider, I guess, a demi god in this case.
Yeah. And that's exactly it. Like you can also go further. Here, let me go ahead and pull up because I do have the DMG as well for these things. It explains gods of your world. Yeah. There's example pantheons that they have, and there are religious systems that can be placed. You can have loose pantheons, just like a set like gods can kind of represent here and there. There's type pantheons where this god only represents this domain and that's it. There's mystery cults. Cults can also the very belief can bring things to life. There's monotheism, which is to revere one deity. There's dualism, which is the ability of two dramatically opposed deities or divine forces, such as life and death. Let's see. Animism is that spirits inhabit every part of the natural world, such as like from the greatest mountain being a spirit to the lowest to this little pebble having a spirit that inhabits it. And not all divine powers need to be derived from deities. In some campaigns, believers hold enough conviction in their ideas about the universe that they gain a magical power from that conviction. So just forces and philosophies also do stuff.
Right. So establishing these basic tenets is like something that can give you a very good foundation for building a world.
Exactly. And then it keeps going further into explaining how there's humanoids and the gods, and in a small little subsection, it explains that there are overall 3 types of deities. There are greater deities, lesser deities, and quasi deities. Greater deities are pretty obvious what we just created. They are beyond mortal understanding. They can't be summoned, and they're almost always removed from direct involvement in mortal affairs. On very rare occasions, they manifest avatars similar to lesser deities, but slaying a greater god's avatar has no effect on the god itself. Then we get to lesser deities. Lesser deities are embodied somewhere in the planes. Some lesser deities live in the material plane, as does the unicorn goddess Lure to the Forgotten Realms and the titanic shark god Sekolah revered by the Sagwin. Others live in the outer planes, as Lolth does in the Abyss, and such deities can be encountered by mortals. And lastly, quasi-deities. Quasi-deities have a divine origin, but they don't hear or answer prayers, grant spells to clerics, or control aspects of mortal life. They're still immensely powerful beings, and in theory could ascend to godhood if amassed enough worshippers. Quasi-deities fall into 3 subcategories, though. Demigods, titans, and vestiges. I think we all know what a demigod is. It's when a deity and a mortal have a baby. They have some divine attributes, but their mortal parentage makes them the weakest quasi-deities. There's titans. Titans are divine creations of deities. They might be birthed from the union of 2 deities, manufactured on a divine forge, born from the blood spilled by a god, or otherwise brought about through divine will or substance. And lastly, vestiges. Vestiges are deities who have lost nearly all of their worshippers and are considered dead from the mortal perspective. Esoteric rituals can sometimes contact these beings and draw on their latent power. So, while I said the pantheon we created is all greater deities, technically, the only real greater deities amongst these all is anti-magic and wild magic. Those are the 2 greater ones, because their offspring were creatures that actually are entities that created things and so forth. Technically, you could also life can be embodied as someone who went off to create the heavens, and death went off to become someone who rules the underworld and so forth. You can make the god of death like that, and it's someone that can actually be encountered by people. And then taking a look at that even further, things that were just kind of willed into existence, such as Forge and Tempest, are pretty obvious. That's like the god of the storms. You can actually physically, when I say the god of the storms, it's almost like you can actually imagine some sort of silhouette of a creature embodying this, because there's so many different mythologies and religions that have god of storms, like how a storm is envisioned as a physical entity. And so that's just another thing. Technically, everything we've created here is a titan. Or like
pretty much
a titan or a lesser deity. And so
Gotcha.
It kind of just goes to show that it's whatever you want it to label as well. If you really want, you can just make a world filled with nothing but quasi deities and just call it a day. But I really wanted to just I liked where I went with it, because the main reason why I thought of it was, at first, anti-magic and wild magic weren't the original gods. At first, it kind of just went off, I took a look at Arcana, and I thought, oh, here's a god of magic that controls the weave. Then, eventually, I was like, oh, wait, the weave has 2 different types as well as being balanced. So then I thought, oh, let's just split it in 2. And I thought, what if these 2 were in love? And whenever they dance, the weave was just in perfect balance. But then I said, what happens when they're not dancing? And so I then took them to the stratosphere and above and made them the original 2 creatures that were born, because the weave is always present.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
If I could
really
add on
interesting.
something as well, is that when it comes to all the, because even when I heard about something like the vestiges, the first thing I thought of is that's kind of how a vestige has this kind of latent power. That's kind of how I feel when it comes to I guess a hexblade warlock is they're getting a weapon that inherently it has the power in there, but it's not the actual deity itself. Is just what is left of them. You just hear the whispers of the weapon and all that type of thing.
Exactly. you know, a lot of times, like for example, warlocks, they the creatures that they make deals with don't even have to be all that powerful. That's why kind of like warlock patrons can even be genies, because it's powerful enough that it can bestow upon power to someone else.
I mean, hey, we can get warlocks that are actually like what? You can be a warlock that's service to, I guess, Titania from the Feywild.
And so, now that I kind of had this greater pantheon, from here I can just ramble on and keep making stories of lesser gods. Oh, here's how. Oh, life event after the humanoids are created. Life and death went back to their constant struggle. Like, by the way, this is me literally just spitballing this right now. When all was settled and the humanoids finally were all done and they had their own communities and the 5 aspects were born, life and death went back to their struggle and eventually went on to create their went on to claim dominion of 2 planes. So death resides in Hades, whereas life resides in Elysium. And it's like then Forge God went over to Mechanus, and the God of Chaos went over to Limbo. And it's like now, but I literally just made this up right now. So it's like we do that, boom, 1, 2, 3, 4. Here are where the 4 gods are actually residing, and then from here, the 4 gods will take a look at what's inside of that plane and create offspring. So now life all of a sudden has like these different followers, and death has these different followers, and so forth. I could even say that going along the lines of life and death are in a constant struggle with each other, where it's like they keep sending people to deal with each other's territory. And so it explains how life eventually sent angels to the 9 hells to go and deal with it, and death eventually sent things to the Beastlands to go and deal with it, right?
Right.
But the forces kind of make direct beelines. That's kind of why you don't see Mechanus or Limbo with quote unquote, you know, exact forces, and you don't usually see life and death doing that because they're more or less dealing with the planes that are more affected by that are more closely related to their stuff. Here it is. The life and death can never send their forces to the opposite plane, so instead they're going to weaken each other. You'll see a lot of life forces here and here, and even less of those forces here and here. Just like death will try to affect these 2, and then even less so in these 2, because just like order and chaos are at struggle. Here is this and this, this and this, boom, 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 and now you have this like constant back and forth struggle within the order, chaos, life, and death. And so it explains that these are like the 4 original rulers that dictate what happens in the cosmology wheel, whereas the 5 aspects reside in here. Nature, light, and grave are over here. Wild magic and anti-magic just kind of like, oh man, we had kids, we're grandparents now, we don't give a shit, let's just retire and go do something. And so they just go as they please anywhere they wish. And it's one of those, none of the other gods want to fuck with their parents or their grandparents because it's kind of an asshole thing, so they'll just leave them to their own devices. And so I thought of the idea of what if anti-magic and wild magic made a habit of like, now that they're retired, they like they have avatars that go down to the different planes to go and do whatever they want. Let's see.
That's kind of interesting. So basically, it's kind of like they're doing their own thing, and says, okay, now I'm bored. Time to see what the humans are up to.
Exactly. That's one of those like anti-magic and wild magic. They had their fun. They've had their life, and they're in their twilight years. They're not dying per se, but they're like they did what they wanted to do, and they are content. Now let us go and see what our children have created. Oh, look at this! Our children have created humanoids. Let us walk amongst the humanoids. let's not interfere in their creation. Let us just marvel at it. But even then, like the avatars that they send there are like, that's how the humanoids created like legends and stuff, because they're like, look at two ancient beings, how are these wild magic and anti magic zones being created? Why is it that like there's a legend that sometimes in the darkest in the center of anti magic zones or in the center of wild magic zones, you might see two entities that dance in a never ending formation, trying to balance the weave from that which they created in their fights.
Cool.
But obviously they can't undo what they've done, so it's kind of beautiful, the idea of imagining these two. They are revisiting the scars of their past, and rather than trying to mend what's already been done, they are reveling in it and dancing amongst it. That's really nice, actually.
Cool.
And we've created the Pantheon, and we've created the overall world. Let's take a nice step back from that, and let's take a look now at the smaller details. Crazy how, like, now that we've talked about the world, now that we've talked about, like, the creation of everything, let's talk about the smaller thing. Let's talk about the actual physical world that you guys are going to be inhabiting, which is still really big to us, but so small on their scale. We're now understanding this. So now we're getting down to the nitty-gritty. What I was gonna say, I'm right now like trying to formulate stuff in my head. How would you guys go about? What would be something that you would want to make in your own original world? Tell me ideas that have come up in your head through like what we've been talking about today.
Well, I like I definitely like the good, evil, and neutral thing.
Here, hold on.
Idea.
I was gonna say is I think something's going on with your mic. It sounds a little choppy. Do you want to disconnect and reconnect?
Yeah, give me a second.
Sure. Yeah, I'm gonna drag him in right now.
Yeah.
All right. Let me.
And
How are you sounding, my man?
Okay, am I good now?
Yes, much better.
hell yeah.
Okay. So I was about to say that I like the little the good and the evil and the neutral idea. That would that sounds pretty nice. And then another thing that I took into account is like how the gods came to be, and like how they split off into different areas, and how they will like affect certain areas, and how they would cause anti magic in one area while causing wild magic in the other. I like those ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing that I found interesting was like the different the different obstacles other than people people that like the adventurers might have to face. Instead of like facing other adventurers, you got like giants, dragons, and with so much that could come out of this, but
Mm-hmm. Right.
like that. I like how there's like a balance at some point between how which gods go where, and like how they affect each other, and how they affect their world and how they affect each other's world, and it just creates this like balance.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot that I really enjoy. There's a lot that I really enjoy hearing about, like, just creating whole new worlds and stories is really huge to me. And so it's one of those fun times where it's like this is my first time creating my own pantheon, and I really like creating your own pantheon is always very fun because you can imagine how what gods matter to you. How do you imagine the gods messing with outside forces and so forth, right? What about you, Rico? What are your thoughts? What would be something that you would do differently?
Hey, hold up. I think I wanted to finish saying something
sorry.
before I can.
Oh no, I'm good. I'm good.
Okay. Well, for me, I just I don't mind the concept of the gods and all that because it is true. I do believe. I feel like, and I guess I'm a strong believer of gods just being a byproduct of
Mm-hmm.
enough belief and enough magic to where people kind of make. So they're again, like you said, they're kind of like I guess Dark Souls boss where, and it depends, I guess, on the how people would want their gods to be. Like if they want them to be these all-powerful beings that can't be touched, then the magic creates that. Or if they want them to be more relatable to them, then they're kind of like mortal beings. And I kind of like that, and I kind of like the aspect of like a world starting off with gods being based on people, but as more as it goes on, people are kind of getting desperate and making their own individual gods, and it kind of becomes oversaturated. And I can imagine a world riddled with literal, like, super powered beings powered by their own individual gods wiping each other out. And then there's just like these, I guess, the titans, the gods that are so powerful that no matter how much you believe your god is strong, it cannot topple these ones.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just I don't know, it's very interesting. And I kind of like in this world, I kind of believe maybe like the whole vestige thing you said. Like I feel like depending on how people think about it, I feel like certain gods in their vestige form would be a lot stronger than if they were an actual god, because I guess the vestige, it's a the thing about any species, especially with the human race, is that it's not about how much power you have, it's how creative you are with it. And I feel like a vestige is the ultimate, I guess, test of what things like the human race can do with what little power they.
Mm-hmm. I like that. I That's an interesting idea to think about the vestiges being stronger in the, I guess, their for quote unquote forgotten forms, because they have a lot more to do, right? They sometimes the vestiges getting back to their state makes them go to new ends that they would have never done before if they had never been brought down there, or even just, you know, now that they're closer. Oh, hold on, he disconnected.
Yeah. Kind of got cut off like mid sentence as well. So
Oh, okay, so
yeah,
that
he'll
probably
be
makes
back.
sense.
Yeah.
There we go.
Hello,
Welcome
back.
back.
There you are.
Sorry, where did I end? Because goddamn, I didn't realize I
You
got
were
cut
you
off.
were you were talking about the vestiges and how like it's how they would be stronger, than in their vestige form than in their original form.
Yeah, I say that because as it comes to anything like a human being, I feel like the ultimate test of being what it is to be human in this case is being able to use what little power you have at its maximum potential. And I feel like that would be like the downfall of any, I guess, super made god, where it's like they think, oh, you have this low power, what can you do? And then, the little person just smiles and says, well, watch me, as some gods just get either toppled or just surprised at how someone with so little power can even like strike things like fear or intrigue in them.
Mm-hmm. I like that a lot. I think part of me is like, so now, like I said, a lot of what I do whenever I'm like listening is also coming up with more stuff. Like right now, it dawned on me listening to your guys' two topics, especially with what you bring to the table, with like the gods that are being slain and stuff, and those that are underestimating the others. I like the idea of there's also like you have to go into like how the races work, right? How do Dragonborn get made?
Mm-hmm.
And like part of what I think of is that um I think there's a lot of confusion around Dragonborn. And so my idea is that Light created the Dragonborn as separate entities from the dragons that have always existed, but went into hiding because they were in fear of their dragons, or they probably served as slaves to the dragons. You know?
I'd
Mm-hmm.
say I'd say more or less a fear and went into hiding
Mm-hmm.
instead of like wave thing, because more times than not, if a dragon doesn't need someone, they most likely kill them.
Yeah, I think it does vary as well, because even the dragons had disputes amongst themselves. It was explained that before before the chromatics and the metallics were a thing, there was one dragon type. There was and when the giant god slew cleaved the dragon in half, it split into a chromatic deity and a metallic deity that became Bahamut and Tiamat.
You know, I actually thought of another idea as well.
Yeah.
What?
I think that's actual like original Forgotten Realms lore as far as Tiamat and Bahamut. And so Tiamat and
Yeah.
Bahamut, in upon being born, fought the giant god and slew them, but immediately after found that they had like vast differences, and the only time that they ever worked together was upon being born. After the conflict of their battle with that god, they realized they hated each other and they just one's good, one's evil. They always are opposite forces and so forth. Just like how I need to come up with like elven gods and so forth, because to elves, it's probably the first elf that was ever here was like to elves nowadays that was like the first elf, that's their god. They ascended to godhood because they had enough believers in them, just like like orcs and stuff probably had their own god. I think their god is like Grummish or something, and so that explains how like the orc god came about, because it was amongst the first humanoids, and so it's like he may not have lived long, but he left a mark that would inspire the rest of the orcs.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like what's his name? Talos in Skyrim. Talos was never like wasn't even a god or a deity. They were just like a really famous event. They were a really famous hero that saved the land, and I think they were a dragonborn, right? That's like a big thing that's said in Skyrim, that Talos was the other dragonborn. Or Talos was a dragonborn, and so it was kind of like him being a thing, and his stories passing down and told from people to people revered him, that even in death he became a god.
Mm-hmm.
Because just enough people believed it, and that's kind of one of the biggest things about Skyrim, is that the worship of Talos is supposed to be outlawed because some people don't believe that he's actually a god, and like that's another thing where it's like deities create conflict amongst people because of who they believe in. The Feywild and Shadowfell and the Material Plane probably don't get along as well as people would think, because nature, light, and grave created them differently and were their creators. So they probably have more like most of the creatures in the material plane revere the light god as their biggest thing, and that's why like nature's kind of like secondhand to them, because they just light matters more than nature, and light matters more than death. But then you have some that are like take sides others, and it's just there's no I think when it comes to human, the only absolute things about people is that they will live and they will die, right? The way that they interact and the way that they are varies so much that you can't ever really do much beyond that. But you can that's the whole like, not all drow are lawful evil. There's good drow like Dristurden. And just there's so much that I really love about it.
Very quickly, Zeno, I was gonna. I'm not too thinking, but I wanted to go back to the little, Dragonborn. And I was just gonna make a quick note about the Dragonborn. I was gonna ask, like, what if it was just both scenarios where, like, half of them were slaves and the other half were like, in hiding.
I like that. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
There's a lot, and right now this is probably the part where like, now that I've created the big pantheon, it's like, okay, where do you go from here? Because this is that point where I mentioned to people in the beginning where it's like, there's so many ways I can like go with this topic that it almost seems like I could diverge so far, and like, oh no, he's jumping from elves to dragons to lizard folk to humans to orcs, but he's not like really defining them. These are like just footholds, right?
Right.
Some people can get overwhelmed and can lose it from here, and like maybe they'll enter this state where they're like, what do I do? Got to figure it out. And just biggest thing is you've accomplished your goal of making the pantheon. Create a new goal. And so that's part of why it's like I need to create societies. What were the first civilizations? While in the material plane, the dragons and giants formed civilizations, but so did the other humanoid. So did the other creatures. Like beasts didn't form civilizations because they didn't have the mental capacity to do that. Monstrosities, it varied, but I want to say that they were so varied in number they can never agree upon forming civilizations. But like the giants and the dragons, those were like, wow, these things are really powerful and really strong and intellectual. They created their own civilizations, and thus the dragons and the giants were the first civilizations in the material plane. In the Shadowfell, the vampires were the first civilization. I have to like pull up. This is that whole like you just take a look at the DMG, have fun creating what's in there. Like if I take a look at the Shadowfell is also called the Plane of Shadow, is dimension of black, gray, and white, where most color has been bleached from everything. Is a place of darkness that hates the light, where the sky is a black vault and neither sun nor stars. Shadow crossings, domains of dread, the despair, and then you can kind of go into like what creatures inhabit this, and then think about like just generally thinking about the creatures. Vampires is a huge thing that I can think of, that would inhabit this place. And if you can't think of anything too much, then create another deity and let that deity create something. Because life and death, from the way I described it in my homebrew world, life and death's conflict created the positive negative plane, and it was their influence on the grave and nature that created the Feywild and the Shadowfell. This would imply that the Shadowfell, maybe there's like one of the things that got created when grave and when grave and death weren't looking was like something sprouted, and they're like, what the fuck is that? And it's just I am murder. Fuck, did we just create something? I think we did. Skittles heard me earlier that there was a funny idea that I had. Imagine like a little meme format where it's like, imagine, so here, take Pillsbury Doughboy model, right? Round it out, smooth the sides, and make it white. Make it pure white. And take that same one and make it pure black, okay? So life and death, right? There was a funny idea that I had where like life was like messing around with Play-Doh, and it's like, I made it. I made life. Meanwhile, death kind of like waddles over, bops the little thing that life just made, and it immediately dies. Life just goes crying as death goes waddling on past them.
That sounds about right.
It's like, no.
It was at this
No.
it was at this moment that the parents knew they would not get along.
No, I like this one. It's perfect. No, this is a perfect meme for me as well. It's like, life is just like, life, what do you got there? Death! No!
Oh, man.
And from that moment forward, there'll be life and death.
Right?
Yeah.
There's
Also,
what's up?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go for it.
No, I was gonna say also to kind of what you said, like continue on besides the Pantheon. Like I was thinking, in my way similar to that, like to like years of Pantheons. That okay, we have, all these different sides, order, chaos, and all that. And like you said, there's these, the humans are there in the world, and people like chaos, like life and death are still trying to get in each other's thing in the mortal plane. So it's like, Hades is like, oh, well, I want to mess with the humans, but we don't have anything in there that can like go in there right away and destroy them. We don't want to just kill them outright either. So it's like, how do we do this? So they get like I guess like you need like incubuses and succubuses to go up there, and then bada bing, bada boom, the first tieflings are born. And then, they see the guys above and light see it's like, hey, we can't let them do that. Let's go down there too. And then they kind of do the same thing. Bada bing, bada boom, Asimars are born. And so originally, they were kind of forces made with mortal flesh in order to oppose one another. But as time goes on, times change. They kind of forget that, and it's kind of like, oh, what are you? It's like, oh, I'm an Asimar. It's like, oh, okay, so bada bing, bada boom, you think someone is celestial. Same thing with tieflings. It's like, oh, so your parents boned a demon. It's like basically.
Mm-hmm. And so it's like it's one of those you know, it's the butterfly effect, right? The demon and humanoid eventually created something, and maybe the first offspring was still a demon, but that demon had enough human DNA that when that one, like centuries down the line, mated with a humanoid, then it like started becoming more and more to the point where it created its own race of creatures known as the tieflings.
Yeah, and even goes to like say with form of like I guess Darwinism, to where for all we know, the first Asimars and Tieflings weren't even that great. If anything, they were mostly probably deformed based on, you know, incompatibility with like DNA and all that. And the Tieflings and Asimars we see now are after 3 years of evolutionary, you know, involvement.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Let's see. Restoring lights.
I just find it interesting, all those different type of humanoid races that are mixed with things outside of the norm.
Yeah. And so there's here, let's take a look at this. Taking a look at the DMG. Let me pull up. Okay. So it recommends the big picture, you know. Oh, this is the big one, obviously. I totally forgot about this. Core assumptions. Hold on. There we go. So, when you're making your world, it's good to kind of have fallback things that you want to agree on, right? You have rules that you set for yourself, so when you're creating your world or whenever you're in a funk, and you're trying to remember how things are supposed to work, you have these assumptions to fall back on. Here are the 5 most basic assumptions that are assumed, and remember, these are the basic assumptions. You can always interchange these with what you feel like you want to do. Number 1, gods oversee the world. The gods are real and embody a variety of beliefs. With each god claiming dominion over an aspect of the world, such as war, forest, and sea, gods exert influence over the world by granting divine magic to their followers and sending signs and portents to guide them. The follower of a god serves as an agent of that god in the world. The agent seeks to further the ideals of that god and defeat its rivals. While some folk might refuse the honor of gods, none can deny their existence. That's the first assumption. Number 2, much of the world is untamed. Wild regions abound. City-states, confederacies, and kingdoms of various sizes dot the landscape. But beyond their borders, the wild crowds in. People know the area they live in well. They've heard stories of other places from merchants and travelers, but few knows what lies beyond the mountains or in the depths of the great forest unless they've been there themselves. 3, the world is ancient. Empires rise and fall, leaving few places that have not been touched by imperial grandeur or decay. War, time, and natural forces eventually claim the mortal world, leaving it rich with places of adventure and mystery. Ancient civilizations and their knowledge survive in legends, magic items, and their ruins. Chaos and evil often follow an empire's collapse. 4. Conflict shapes the world's history. This is already pretty obvious from what it's saying. Powerful individuals strive to make their mark in the world, and factions of like-minded individuals can alter the course of history. Factions include religions led by charismatic prophets, kingdoms ruled by lasting dynasties, and shadowy societies that seek to master long-lost magic. The influence of such factions waxes and wanes as they compete with each other for power. Some seek to preserve the world and usher in a golden age. Others strive towards evil ends, seeking to rule the world with an iron fist. Still, others seek goals that range from the practical to the esoteric, such as the accumulation of material wealth or the resurrection of a dead god. Whatever their goals, these factions inevitably collide, creating conflict that can steer the world's fate. And lastly, the world is magical. Practitioners of magic are relatively few in number, but they leave evidence of their craft everywhere. The magic can be unconscious and commonplace, as a potion that heals wounds, to something much more rare and impressive, such as a levitating tower or a stone golem guarding the gates of a city. Beyond the realms of civilization are caches of magic items guarded by magic traps, as well as magically constructed dungeons inhabited by monsters created by magic, curses by magic, or endowed with magical abilities. And so with these 5, you can very much sum it up to gods are a thing. The world is uncharted. The world is old. The world has conflicts, and the world is magical. All of these things that are going about your world, and so these are the 5 most basic assumptions. But that's obviously with exceptions based off of how you want to form it. For example, let's say the world is actually a mundane place? What if magic is rare and dangerous, and even adventurers have limited or no access to it? What if your campaign is set in a version of our own world's history? So, it's like, what if instead of magic, just remove it, take it away? Obviously, people who want to play mages are not. They know what they're signing up when the DM tells them that there is no magic in this world. This is gonna go back to table talk, but DMs, if you're making a world without magic, tell your players. If you're making a world that has so much magic that fighters and barbarians have like a hard time in it, tell your players. Your players should know what they're getting themselves into before they jump headlong into your campaign and get committed. Hence why DMs will advertise, I'm making a mundane event world, so if you guys are looking for something that has little to no magic, come on in and join. I try my best to do a good balance of it all, so that way there's something for everyone to join.
Quick little note.
What's up?
Quick little note. You do a very good job of doing that. All right, continue.
Thank you very much. Here, what if instead of the world being ancient, the world is actually new? What if your world is new and the characters that are playing it are the first in a long line of heroes? The adventurers might be champions of the first great empire, such as the empires of Netheril or Commander in the Forgotten Realm setting. So, in fact, what if, like, me creating the world right now, right? What if I just stopped it right here and said, all right, guys, this is what we're playing in. You guys are... There's the first Elven Empire, there's the first Orc Empire, there's the first Humanoid Empire, and you guys are a part of this. And so there's no real history to go off of. People are, in fact, making new things almost every day, if not every, like, few years or so. Here's another one that's also interesting. The world is known. So instead of the world being uncharted, what if the world is completely charted and mapped? Right down to the "Here there be dragons" notations. If great empires cover huge stretches of countryside with clearly defined borders between them. What if the 5 nations of Eberron setting were once part of one great empire and magically aided travel between cities is a commonplace? So it's like, oh, look at this. It's not like whole areas are hard to get to. While I did create, here's one thing I want to point out. While I am creating, right, like this is one whole area right here. Oh, there we go. So while this is one whole area and this is one whole area, they're only in alliance with each other. That doesn't mean that, like, I was kind of thinking to myself, what if this area primarily has humans? This area primarily has, like, your Dragonborn and your half-orcs, and, like, oh, this area is your elves and stuff. And so it's like different nations that are allied amongst each other. But even with them understanding this, what if the reason that this is such a big territory with, like, all of its stuff is because there's a huge stretch of desert that just no one goes near. No one tries to make anything there because there's things that are too dangerous and uncharted there. What if this island is technically under their territory, but realistically no one lives there? Because, you know, dangers and magic and stuff from previous ruins and stuff. What if all of the civilizations were here, here, and here, and in this entire area is the ruins of an ancient empire that once stood here? And so when people go through this land, they'll find, like, hidden inside of the dunes are, like I said, the ruins of the past. Here we go, another one. What if monsters were rare and terrifying? Monsters here are uncommon. In the Ravenloft setting, horrific domains are governed by monstrous rulers. The populace lives in perpetual terror of these Dark Lords and their evil minions, but other monsters rarely trouble people's daily lives. So what if I just make a world that only has one dragon in it? What if there's only 3 dragons in this world? You know? It's these are ways to kind of alter it. But here's another one that's also very fun. To rival the world as a mundane place, what if magic is just everywhere? What if every town was ruled by a powerful wizard? What if magic item shops are common? The Eberron setting makes the use of magic an everyday occurrence, as magical flying ships and trains carry travelers from one great city to another. And the last assumption, which is kind of a 2-part assumption, gods inhabit the land or are entirely absent. What if the gods regularly walk the earth? What if the characters can challenge them and seize their power? Or What if the gods are remote, and even angels never make contact with mortals? In the Dark Sun setting, the gods are extremely distant, perhaps non-existent, and clerics rely instead on elemental power for their magic. Let me take a nice drink of this. Those are all examples of assumptions that could swap it out. But it goes based off the 5 standard assumptions, and you kind of taking those 5 assumptions and just, what if I didn't do that, right? What if I changed it up? That's a good way of looking at it. And just taking those assumptions one by one, that's a good way for us to build this. The first assumption is the gods oversee the world. And so that's a good way of, let's start with the Pantheon. Let's start with that. Boom, boom, boom. From here. This one's another part. Now, this is, funny enough, I was kind of getting to this, but now it's getting to mapping our campaign, right? Mapping our world, and much of the world is untamed. So, while technically I'm mapping it, I'm actually just selecting regions that I just don't want civilizations to exist in. So, like, how do I put it? It's almost like painting a picture using the negative space. You know, anyone can do this. And which did I define this image with? The positive or the negative space? So instead of defining it by, I am painting it and filling in everywhere that will be civilization, I'll swap that around. Let me instead say everywhere that there won't be civilization in. And let me explain why that can't be. What if it's because people are too afraid of the dragons here, and like the giants inhabit this one, and the fucking lizard folk and Yanti inhabit this area. So we're defining our area not by what it is, but what it can't be. From there, a good step after that is the third assumption, which is the world is ancient. We can take this and decide how far into the past and how far into the future do we want to go. Do we want to go so far into the past that we're back at the beginning and we're like literally the first humanoids? Or do we want to go so far into the future that it's super technologically, magically advanced and we have magic ships and magic guns and magic weapons all over the place? You decide. And when you're deciding this, you decide where the civilizations are and where civilizations were. Using the locations where land cannot be. Let's say, going back to this whole idea, because I'm going to probably do that with this desert. Let's say if, like, this desert, right? It used to be inhabited. There used to be civilization here, 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 and what else doing here, right? And there used to be roads that connected these things. But something happened, and so now this entire region is not able to be explored, and there's ruins in this desert. But because of the fact that this desert can't be explored, new civilizations were built up. Right? And these civilizations go around the desert now. Never, like, as much as technically they could do this, they don't, because it's dangerous to do that. And so that's the whole, we have defined our civilization by the negative spaces. And it's like, you could tell the adventuring party, okay, we gotta get to this, we're at this town, we gotta get to this one. Hey guys, let's just cut through the desert. And then like an NPC goes, you guys are gonna cut through the desert? Yeah, why? No, don't. There's supposed to be monsters in there from ancient times before. And that tells the adventurers, so you're saying there's experience. Or it's telling the players, so you're saying that's a TPK, Mr. DM? Yes. We're defining our world.
Yeah.
By where you can and can't.
I basically, that's basically just the two ways that I can go.
Yeah.
Either the players see it as like, look, more experience. Or, we're going to die if we go in this desert. Maybe we should listen to the NPC and go around.
Mm-hmm. Then it's like, okay, now that we have that, let's talk about the conflict now that we have our region set up. What if like there's no conflict that happens here because it's a natural area, but there's conflict that happens here. I've kind of told myself that the green is a neutral party and no one attacks them because they have the best defense. So instead, let's take a look at this, right? Let's say there's a battle here, 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 and here in between these two nations, and the blue is considering defending themselves. And there's a huge battle that happens here, as well as warfare battles that happen, navy battles that happen here and here.
That's very understandable.
Then there's here, navy battle here, and it's like this is just us kind of just defining where fights happen, and like how war would be going through.
I see how like there would be a gigantic battle here because go back to the top right for a second.
Sure.
Like, I can see how there's like this is where one of the bigger battles happen because the blue is basically like that's all they have in that area left.
I made it less of this. So what I did is this. Let me fix this up. Okay. This is how I imagined it. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
This all used to be the blue territory.
Yes.
And this all was the red territory. Okay.
Right.
Natural way worlds work, especially with conquest. You want to expand land, right? So.
Yeah.
The red traveled in here and started expanding. Boom, 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 boom.
Okay, I see it now.
And it creates these like fronts over here that are war conflicts. So, but funny enough, at the same time, red wouldn't notice this right away because what's happening over here? Takeover. And then it begins. Takeover. So it's like,
and then it just
it's just conflict.
Yeah.
And so now that I've defined it as that, it explains this. So check this out. This isn't okay. Why would towns be built on? If I build a town here on the line, with the knowledge of the history, which side are the towns built for? Easy. So if blue is defending and red is advancing, the only reason this border is defined is because that is as far as red is able to push up to, meaning that these are defending towns.
Mm-hmm.
And so with that, then it's like same thing, defending town. Defending towns. Oh, no. And so it's like, okay, let me just do this. It's much easier to just erase. And then same thing, going here. Defending town. Defending pathway. Defending pathway. Defending pathway over here. Because this is like naval stuff right here.
Right.
And so that's how we define towns. The reason red is only as far as they are here is because this is as far as they're able to push up, meaning that there are defenses set here by the blue. And so we can easily define borders that way. Or what if there's only a town here and here because this is no man's land. No one goes through here because there's something terrifying here, right?
Right.
Or like there's terrifying here, and this is a town. So it's like the red is like, why don't we just advance through here? Oh no, we've lost plenty of men. We just have to remember it and define the blue border like this. Because that is like these are where past civilizations were that are causing us to lose men. And so that is how the blue towns are developed. Where these apexes are represent where the blue town have defenses, and where these dips are represent just the oh no, here we go. They're defending this. We can't go through here. They're defending this. We can't go through here. You take every dip and everything that way. Just like if I were to go here and erase these guys, this dip is going this way, indicating that probably the reason why there's a lot of naval warfare here is because this area is dangerous to go through. And yeah, that's how we go with conflict shapes the world history. And the last one, which is probably, I think, the easiest to define, is just the world is magical. How magical, in fact? Well, this is where I'm finally going to talk about the Green Nations, which is they're so magical that they have the best defense. Red and blue don't want to dare go against them because green has, like, the best technology, and they're almost afraid that green is going to do something to, if it's like you don't poke the sleeping bear. You don't poke Green Nation, because as much as they have the least amount of land, they are also the most terrifying in the fight.
Exactly. Never underestimate this. Never underestimate this there.
Yes. And here's what I'm going to go ahead and tell you guys, and anyone who's listening, a nice little sneak as to what's to come. Hold on, what is going on here? Hold on. All right. Hot jump.
I'll be right back.
Okay. I'm right now waiting because it looks like Hayes wants to join. Welcome, welcome.
It was good.
Not much. You came in, right now we kind of were going over, I was telling the story about how the Pantheon and how the creation of the Homebrew Worlds universe was.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, a lot of this is, like, world building 101, but it's also, like, anyone who's watching the stream is getting a sneak peek as to what's happening to your guys' Homebrew World that's going to come in, like, about half a year or so.
Okay.
So, if you're looking at the stream share, you can see that, like, this is how the nations are divided up. And I was just explaining to them that this all was entirely blue, and this all was entirely red, but red was invading into this area.
Okay.
But what red didn't realize was that blue was invading their area as well, and this is why there's conflict here, 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 and here. And we're just world building. You explain why, like, towns aren't just randomly placed. Towns are placed because either they're defensive points. Towns are placed around places that are too dangerous to live in. So, like, or even maybe towns are just, no one wants to rebuild on places that are already built upon, like ruins and stuff. So towns will go away from past civilizations to build something different. Or maybe it's in commemorance to the past civilization that they'll build right next to it. There's all types of ways that are all about world building. But since you have just gotten here, Hayes, let me ask you this. In your ideal homebrew world, how do you let me go through this one by one. How would you perceive the gods in your own idea of your make-believe world? Are the gods present? Are they absent? Or are they kind of somewhere in between?
I feel like if we found them more present.
You'd want
because
them... Okay.
Because I feel like in most fantasy genres where there are gods, they're more kind of just like, they're there and you get some guidance from them. That's pretty much all you get sometimes.
All right.
Like kind of like where it's like the Greek pantheon, where it's like they come to Earth and they come to fuck around sometimes.
Mm-hmm. So that's how you'd want it, right? In your homebrew world.
Yeah.
All right. I like that. Let me ask you this: how much of the world is untamed and uncharted? Is the world is every nook and cranny of the world known about, and like people in fact will tell you, oh, don't go here because there's dragons, or don't go, or you should check out this spot because it's a really beautiful nature thing? Or is the world like uncharted and no one knows what's around the mountain?
I like the secondary because it gives kind of a sense of excitement and say, "Oh, what's here next?" Also gives you more of leeway to fuck with us.
All right. Here's a really fun one that I like. How far into your world's history is this? Are we talking this is so into the beginning that we're like in the beginning of when civilizations were formed? Or are we so far into the future that civilization has advanced to the point where technology is a commonplace thing? Or, obviously kind of in the middle.
Mm, I would like guns,
You would
but
like
I
guns.
would,
All right. So what are we are we talking like steampunk?
I would say steampunk would be cool.
Alright.
Also, I also like I like the idea of like high fantasy Western type
I
area.
like this. I like this. That kind of
Like
reminds me of a player idea of like hold on. There was an artificer thing. Let's see. Gun mage.
yeah, hold on. I have a picture that I actually have that I've saved from years ago. That's just like I always just like loved like how it looked.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I just like the idea of a fucking cowboy robbing you with a fucking wand. It makes me laugh sometimes.
Here we go. Okay, check this out. Someone I don't let me find who did this. Okay. I don't know if I'm gonna pronounce this right, but CAIO, so Ko Santos. Look in stream VC text. It's time for cowboy up with portal guns.
Ah, yes.
Oh, that's the same picture. Yeah, that's the picture. Love that. It was cool as shit.
What's
That's like
better
the
than a
idea of like
gunslinger? A gunslinger with portable guns.
Exactly.
exactly the image.
It's
Like the idea.
it's yeah. Don't worry. I think I'm glad we're on the same wavelength. So it's like it's Western fantasy with magic.
Yeah, basically. I like
And
the idea of a wizard, but their spell focus is a gun, and like they basically shoot other spells.
Oh no, I am 100% on that train. I like that a lot.
I'm pretty sure you would be playing an artificer because that like artificers can make their quote unquote gun their arcane focus, I believe. Because what it is that how like wands exist?
Yeah.
Artificers can craft a wand to look like a gun, and in fact, that wand shoots spells stronger than like other wands because it was crafted to be like a gun, like a pew pew, or or in the event of a staff, you could turn a staff into a rifle.
Yeah, I like the idea because I know that artificers get like a lead level ability,
Mm-hmm.
level 10ish, where they can turn like specific items into like spell storing items.
Mm-hmm.
Even though the levels are like level 1 and 2, I just like the idea of somebody like putting like a fireball spell into a fucking bullet, just shooting the shit out of somebody.
Right? Or taking like that's exactly how you've made an explosive round, or you put the fireball spell into like a makeshift like little bag of rocks. You throw it, and the fireball spell explodes, sending the rocks as shrapnel. Now, so you've made a grenade.
Yeah. You can even like put like cure wounds into bullets, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. I'm now healing you with my gun.
Yeah.
And so, if that's the case, then let me ask you this: how much does the conflict shape your world? Are there like 10 nations fighting amongst each other? Is the world only have 2 nations that fight each other? Or maybe it's like the world is all one nation and there's individuals in the world that are so powerful that they're trying to go up against the nations.
Nah.
Think of the way like technically the Marvel movies are like good ways of like there's like an overall like world government in a sense, and there's like Doctor Doom is I am the most powerful man and I will take over the world myself type of thing.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, good point. I'm gonna say I might rather like multiple nations fighting.
Mm-hmm. I like that. If you haven't noticed, I've clearly have done that myself with quote unquote 2 nations that fight each other, but there's a Green Party nation that just is like, we're chill. Don't fuck with us. We're not gonna fuck with you, and we're not gonna blow up the world.
Yeah.
Let's see. And I'm pretty sure I already know the answers, but how magical is this world? is it so magical to the point where like magic is like an everyday thing and like there's magic item shops all over, or is it like magic is so rare that seeing a wizard is like, oh fuck, it's a wizard, that's so fucking cool, he's so rare, you don't see any of those.
Like I don't know, I like high fantasy more. Like back in the like when I first started D&D and stuff, I like low fantasy more. Like it was more realistic, quote unquote. But high fantasy is just so much more fun.
Yeah, right. Well, let me explain to you guys. So here's a little sneak peek as to why. So you might be wondering, how is it that I have technology that only exists in these regions and never goes further than that, right? How is it that the Green Party, despite being the most technologically advanced with the absolute best defense system that does not lose any lives in the process, not want to expand any further? And so my future homebrew patriots, this is where I'm explaining that they can't expand further. I've made it that the Green Nation, they're hiding the fact that their defenses cover up their biggest secret, which is that their technology doesn't work beyond those lands, beyond those borders.
So they are limited.
So they can't expand outward, but so they'll expand upward and downward. The technology, think of it like there's a strange effect that is in these lands that make it that big technologies work. Hence why they have like beautiful magical turret guns that can like easily blow an entire ship out of the water with a single shot. But try to build that turret technology maybe like 10 miles or so out into the water. Now it doesn't function the same way. Now it only is able to fire one shot and then it's done for good. So the effect that's in those regions sustains the technology that allows them to keep it that allows them to be so powerful. But it's to cover up the fact that they can't go out further than that. So realistically, throw enough bodies at the wall and eventually the wall will have a dent in it. But no one wants to risk that many. None of the other regions want to risk that many lives to make it through. It's not what you're gaining from taking over those lands is not worth the amount of bodies you need to throw at it. And so they just kind of leave them alone. Part of why I still have to kind of figure out why that is. Maybe I have to throw in something with like the wild magic and anti-magic gods. But let me go ahead and put an excerpt from what I've been working on. I accidentally dipped out. Let me go ahead and give you. So what I did, Hayes, for my creation of the universe was that originally there was nothing, but the one thing that was absolute was that magic existed. And that magic gave birth to the first two gods, which was wild magic and anti-magic. And then from there, their offspring created like other gods, and those gods went off to create went off to create the different worlds and so forth, and went off to create the planes of existence. Some of them never agreed with others, like life and death will never get along, just like order and chaos will never get along. And so it's just there's a lot. And so now that we've come up with like the big pantheon, the main ones that have big domains, I'm like I'll probably come back to them sometime later when I need to insert them into like the civilizations. But for now, I'm just like, okay, now that we've done that, let's talk about where we can't go. So this is where I like get down to the nitty gritty of like, let me do this, define these borders. And then from here, I'll take this whole clunk, and then I'll make like a zoomed in version of that, and then we'll make a homebrew. Then we'll make a world that's based off of that now, and so forth. There's a lot of stuff I really love with this. I really can't wait to like do more. For the most part, are there any questions you guys have when it comes to like making your own stuff?
No, not really.
I think I've made 2 worlds already. Well, not really two worlds, but it's more like had two campaigns, and it was kind of like both groups had like very different like what they wanted.
Mhm.
So I kind of just made like two worlds.
Yeah. And, this all, as much as I'm putting down my notes here, one of the biggest thing I also recommend to people, which I'm actually need to remember to open up right now, is make sure World Anvil is really good. It's entirely free to get into, and what it is that it's a location that allows me to create my world and make articles for it. So in fact, I'm actually like, once I finish my notes over here in Discord, I was gonna copy paste what I have in Discord over into World Anvil, create articles, and like just start doing that. And then once the articles are written down, then maybe in my downtime I'll like look to either commission artist or draw like the Pantheon myself type of thing, and then just like insert it here and there. But right now it's like I need to put words on paper type of thing, and World Anvil is really great for doing that because it keeps it all neatly organized. You guys have any of you who have already like been a part of the homebrew worlds already know that the World Anvil was really great for making interactive maps, aka the world map that you guys occupied, where it's like, here's the main world, now let's click on bullet point A to go see about what's going on here type of thing. There we go. Oh, and on top of this, here's my aspects about the world. So we've taken the 5 aspects, and here's what I'm deciding. First, gods oversee and inhabit the land. We already know this based off of how I've done with the Pantheon and the fact that they kind of do roam around. 2, much of the world is untamed. I do like the idea of leaving the mystery up to us, so you guys are going to see areas that are just no one knows what's over there because no one wants to venture out there. 3, here's our interesting one. The world is fresh, but not new. The world is actually a parallel universe to the previous homebrew worlds, to the point where you're here, hold on. Who my JoJo fanboys? Yay, nay? Okay. My world, in comparison to the previous homebrew world, is what happens at the end of part 6.
Okay.
Oh. Okay.
Who cares?
So, for example, what's I'm looking for?
I like the idea of you having your characters play alternate universe versions of their own characters.
Right, like so think of it like this. I'm now having to roleplay their previous characters because hold on.
What?
There we go. Welcome back. Hello?
Hello.
There you go. Hello.
Seems that Discord heard that and it decided to reset the universe for me.
All right, exactly. So, this is the whole, like, for example, let's take Aspina, right? Aspina in the previous homebrew world. Tell us a little about Aspina, or at least like what is, if you had to make a single sentence that told us about Aspina.
Okay.
Single sentence.
So single sentence.
Yeah,
just a single sentence.
Just single sentence off the top of your head.
A Goliath that wants to help the best way he can.
Okay. So take that idea, and instead of Aspina going off to be this level 20 adventurer that saved the world and stuff, they still went off to help people. But they did it because now there's someone who provides, now they're a guide that helps go through uncharted regions. Aspina is not an adventurer. In fact, they're an archaeologist now in this new homebrew world.
Huh.
You know, like that's what I mean by like the whole reset the universe and people, that the world is fresh because it's new, and it's like there's new Pantheon and everything, but it's not new because your guys' previous characters are now NPCs who are primarily here in name and in personality, not in their feats that they have accomplished before.
Oh.
So Aspina is no longer this grand adventurer. Now they're the archaeologists.
You went from a monk to an archaeologist.
Exactly. What's I'm looking for? Jocelyn is not this super powerful shadow wielding, echo wielding fighter woman. Espina is now, in fact, a pro wrestling woman who is for not Espina. Jocelyn is now a very strong, able-bodied woman who provides entertainment to those with her rippling pectoral muscles.
You wanna mess with the Crusher? You gotta get through me.
And on top of this, now take a look at this. Now, what if I told you that Espina lives down here, and Jocelyn actually lives
Xeno.
about here? Yes.
We cannot see again.
Oh, because I disconnected.
Yes.
What if I told you guys that? Hold on, let me see if you guys have the stream back up. Oh yes.
Yes.
So, what if I told you that Espina lived actually down here and Jocelyn actually lives here? So they're so far apart they never even know of each other's existence, despite your guys' characters previously having known each other. And so by sporadically throwing
it's like a true reset. Like everything has been changed.
Exactly. And let me see. What's another absolute I made, because it's a big part of it. Let's see. Okay. Conflict does shape the world, and the world is magical but not everywhere. AKA, the world is super magical here, here, and here. The world is kind of magical here, here, and here, and the world has little to no magic here and here. It's magical in the right regions, and non-magical in other parts of the world. To the point where, this is probably like, I'll say it as like wild magic probably has like more wild magic zones sporadically thrown about here, 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 and here. And there's more anti-magic zones here, 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 and here. With like the occasional one here, one there, one here, and like one there type of thing. Let's see. So those would be my assumptions. I've described like at least the big part of that I was working on today was the Pantheon. So next time you guys hear a check-in from me, it's probably going to be explaining more about what's to come with the homebrew world, and like what's to come with the conflict and the civilizations, as well as probably the next thing I'm going to be working on is I'm going to first make areas that are not inhabited because of certain reasons, and then from there I'm going to make civilizations and fast forward through time. I'm not going to go so far as to explain there was a single battle that really like did this all. It's like this is where the Elven Empire was, and now they're and it still is there due to the fact that elves lived so long. Whereas like there's like ruins here from like an empire that fell like 2 centuries ago, and 5-10 miles away is a town that is but a pale comparison to that, with only people that are remnants of it via having those people be their ancestors, and so forth. You know, I'm gonna define areas that can't be, and I'm gonna start building civilization, and then fast forwarding through civilization like you see in the trailers for those games. And then just start dotting it out more and more. Once I feel like I'm fast forwarded enough, then I'm gonna go ahead and start actually making roads, making major cities, kingdoms, and so forth, enough to make the world interesting to get through. And on top of this, a big thing is, it's not gonna be a matter of let me do this. So it's not gonna be a matter of here's town A and here's town B, and it takes 10 days to do that, right? No.
Right.
It's gonna take 3 weeks to get from here to here now.
Oh my.
Oh. So now since the world is a bit bigger, it takes a bit longer to get to certain places.
Yes, and for example, why don't we just cut through here? Well, that'd be nice if there wasn't a fucking territory of creatures that lived here. So it's like, fuck, now we gotta go around. And now this one is built like this. You know? And that's roads and travel. And like we zoom in further, there's like other towns that dot the road here, because they like the road ventures off a little bit and has a little town like right here at the end. Maybe it ventures off further. There's another one that's like right here. You know?
Mm-hmm. See that being a thing, you know, like having little towns along the way onto bigger towns.
Mm-hmm.
I'll bear back for a while.
All right. And I'm so excited. I'm so excited. I feel like I'm making a really good headway for what we have, for what's to come, despite the fact that we're like, you guys are all still in the very beginning of your campaigns. No campaign has, well, technically descended to Avernus, but besides them, no campaign has gone beyond session 2. So
Right.
it's like, you know, another thing. Okay, I think this is a good way for me to describe what's to come. When you guys go back into the homebrew world, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to let you guys as a group decide which alliance you want to start with. It doesn't mean that you're faithful to that alliance and like, oh, you guys picked the red alliance, that means you're actually part of the military now. It means if you say you pick green, I am then going to, as myself, determine if you're going to start somewhere in here, or somewhere in here, and then build your campaign, and then like build see the locations that I've marked there, and then give you guys quests and stuff to do. If you guys say you want to start blue, then you guys will start here or here, and you'll realize that you know, like I said before, with the fact that red invaded blue but blue invaded red, no one's the good guy technically. Just because the monstrous races are more commonly evil doesn't mean that they all are. Maybe yeah, it's a greater fixture of that, but it doesn't mean that like, oh, like in these lands, you'll probably start off in a goblin village, and the goblin village has human bandits that keep attacking it, and it's like, why do they keep doing this to us? Because we're better than you. We're good. You guys are evil, and it's like, oh fuck, are they the bad guys? Type of thing. Just as if you were to go here, there's goblins that are invading. It's like, you guys invaded our land. We're gonna kill you. And it's like, no, this is our land first. What are you talking about? And it's the whole like, that's the way civilization, history, and all that stuff was. Maybe at one point this land used to be human run, just like this land used to be monstrally run. But over time, things swapped. Ruins are here, and stories get misled and misheard and wrongly translated throughout the ages. So it's gonna be nice. It's gonna be nice having you guys on different sides, and I can only imagine, like, let's say Group A decides that they want to start red, and Group B decides that they want to start blue, and it's like you guys each are explaining why your side is the right side, and I'm just like, yes, my players are conflicting with each other. Good.
So chaos.
Yes.
Yeah.
Conflict is nice, especially when, like, you know, it's that whole technically no one's right on which side is better than the other. That's
no wrong answer.
There are no wrong and there are no right answers. No no one's good. No one's entirely good. No one's entirely evil. But it's kind of the same way as like if we take a look at like Magic the Gathering, right? If you look at all the different colors in Magic the Gathering have their own reason their own reasons of good and bad. But that doesn't mean that people don't have a favorite color, right? Like for me, I love black decks. I love playing mono black decks because there's just something about the undead that I really like, and like the way that their goals are. Whereas like a player who plays a white deck is like, I don't really care for black decks, and maybe another player is like, I hate going up against black decks, right?
Right.
And same thing can be said with blue decks, red decks, green decks, and of course white decks, and even colorless decks. No side is right, but you guys can have favorites. And so you guys will explain how this is really cool, and you'll hear someone who says, that's really neat, I didn't know that about them. Or, I don't believe that, those guys sound like assholes. You know? It's good conflict in a world that I've created that you guys as much... I think here's another thing I also want to point out. You guys are heroes. You guys are adventurers, but not the leaders. As much as as much as you guys are here to help from world-ending events, and as much as your guys' characters help the town from the goblin horde, that doesn't mean you guys are making major political decisions. Your guys' characters are here to help the world, not change course. Of course, it's like, if you guys are doing a world-ending event, then yes, technically, if you guys fail, the world's doomed. But that's not what this homebrew world's going to be about. The world functions, the world still spins, and the world still moves, even if you guys aren't there. But it's the adventures you guys have in this world that are really nice. I myself am still kind of figuring out how I want to go about this. Like, maybe it's like every campaign I'll either decide to myself, or I'll have like chat or Twitter help me out to decide if the border actually moves just a little bit further that day, or like if this border shrinks a little bit this day, or like maybe something over here in Green's area like develops a new technology type of thing. The world is ever changing in between sessions, and I want to make that evident. It's probably not like immediately like, oh, in group A this happened, and in group B that happened. Oh, it's so fast. How is the world advancing this fast? I want to make it like slow progression. It's a lot of stuff that I haven't planned for this, and it's a lot of then of course once I do that, I have to make the individual villains. There's one villain that we all know is going to exist here. Very handsome devil at that. Referring to XenoLich.
Yeah.
I mean, of course.
XenoLich, the villain? No way.
Well, me,
He's a
no.
real chill guy.
Me, no. The XenoLich, the character, probably. Vote for color, winner, advance. Or like Noida. That's an interesting one. I like that. Let's see.
Oh, green.
Yes. Wow, I think for the most part, like, my brain's kind of like, I burned through a lot of the creative juices here. So let's go ahead and do this here, where we're gonna go ahead and give it a call. Thank you everyone so much for tuning on in. It's always a pleasure having you all join and watch us. If you enjoyed today's content, please be sure to support by following or subscribing on Twitter. For any more for more content, it's been a while since I've done this. For for more stream notifications, possible chances to participate, and content polls, follow my Twitter and come and join us in the Undead Legion Discord. And for any previous stream bots, such as today's video, check out the XenoLich YouTube channel. Be safe and have a good night.
Goodbye.